Hey everybody, welcome today. I've got Jack Lloyd back on the show. Jack, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, you and have had a lot of stuff going on recently. I know I've been waiting for a while for the Kickstarter for the comic, and I heard that just finished up. Not the
uh,
Kickstarter, but the comic itself.
right. Yeah. So we like the Voluntaryist comic book series last year. We did a campaign to do the 6th issue as well as a remaster of the past Origins issues to bring everything into alignment, into continuity, with beautiful art. And we finished it. So we actually could, see right here.
Nope.
This is the
I,
trade paperback edition. This is just a set of 3 of these. You can see there it's got Voluntarist Origins Inkcat Comics. So it looks really cool. It's got a great back on it too. What does it mean to be truly free? So it's got that nice wraparound cover, and they also, there we go. Got the single issue versions here updated too. So basically, we remaster all those covers and the interiors, and now everything is beautiful with stunning artwork outside and in, and great lettering, all that good stuff that I did myself. So I am thrilled and thankful to everybody who's a part of that. And I actually just shipped out the final perks from that campaign yesterday. We wrapped up this weekend just before this hurricane is about to hit. So hopefully it'll get lost in the mail now that the hurricane's flying, because that would stink.
I hope not. I've
Yeah.
been looking forward to it for a while. I got 4 of the originals, and so I ordered from the Kickstarter the last 2 and then the new ones. So I can have the complete set. Got to get them all.
Awesome. Yeah, heck yeah.
I'm excited for that. You've also the hurricane's coming, so that's pretty scary. What not temperature, what category is it now?
I'm not sure exactly, because they were saying it would turn to a major hurricane, like at least a Cat 1 by the time it's coming off Florida's coast, because they said, basically around Cuba, it would pick up some steam. So, we've been watching it. It seems like it's kind of slowed a little bit, because at first they were saying it's coming sooner, and they keep, adjusting the times. And now, I don't know, maybe it will hit, maybe it won't. It is also going a little north. So it's kind of hard to tell. And that's, the thing with hurricanes is, you just don't know. And then of course the government tells the wrong people to evacuate, and they stop private businesses from helping out, from out of state. And they have laws about like price gouging, and that prevents the incentives needed for people to bring in supplies. So as usual, we can expect that at least the government will mess things up, even despite the uncertainty of where the hurricane will fall exactly.
Yeah, that's one thing that's always certain. One organization that we work with is the Cajun Navy, and they're routinely discriminated against by the government, told to stop helping, right, threatened with arrest in favor of the government help that sometimes comes and sometimes doesn't. Little folks at FEMA, etc.
Yeah, I mean, it's nuts. They even will stop people from out of state, like who will come over, who are professionals, right? They're licensed even in their state. They'll try to come over and help out, right? Because you just need extra help and extra hands, more than you have supply for, to fix homes. And then they'll arrest them for being unlicensed in Florida, even though they're perfectly fine in their state for roofing and doing repairs. So they have all these kinds of crazy restrictions that prevent people from actually being able to come and help out, even if they're wanted, right? Someone saying, I want to hire this contractor, we need help, or short on contractors and direct repair people, to come in and help get things fixed faster. And the government stops those outside people who are perfectly competent. No one's saying that they're incompetent, but they're just not licensed in this state, and they don't have the permission and all the hoops that they have to jump through for this state, even though they did it already for their own state.
Yeah, the really galling thing is that they say that's being done to protect people, to protect them from incompetent or dangerous providers of such and such service. You have to get licensed, you have to get registered. Then that stops people, as we've seen, stops people from getting the help they need. So it's just a bad situation. But I want to turn briefly, because we've got our education fundraiser ongoing, because it's back to school season, so more people are interested in that. Even people who don't go to public school, it still feels like that time of year, just because of the culture that we're in. And one of the aspects of things that you do in the liberty movement is your persona as the honest teacher.
Mhm.
So what exactly is that about, the honest teacher?
So when I was, I guess I gotta go back a little bit further than this even. Well, I was a criminal defense lawyer, specifically focused on juvenile defense in the criminal realm. And so being in that environment, I had already had this kind of backdrop of working with young people and seeing what's going on at the ground level with young people being processed in the system for all different types of criminal acts. And a lot of that does circle around schools because kids are often in school. So a lot of times when they're getting arrested for something that deals with school or having school property. And while I was, doing that, it was very frustrating to see how young people were treated in that process. A big part of the juvenile defense system, or I should say the juvenile justice system, is focused on schooling as the norm, right? So a big part of their pressure on kids is like, how are you doing in class? How are you doing in school? There's very little focus on the actual health of the young person, their emotional health, their mental health. Everything is really focused about, oh, if you show up to go to school and you get good grades, and then your life must be dandy, right? Like that's basically kind of how it is structured.
That's measurable. You can't measure how well a person is feeling. That doesn't fit nicely into a little checkbox for the system. Yeah.
Right. They have that whole mentality in the status paradigm that's like, oh, okay, this public school, so this is where you get your SNAP lunches or your, subsidized food or this or that. See, we're going to be basically your parents for kids at risk or in need. So there's that big mentality there that schooling is the savior of young people. It's like this is the church of the state and you need to be in attendance in order to be saved kind of thing. So I was witnessing that. Yeah, it is very creepy for sure, and how they treat it. So I witnessed that and I found it very disturbing and frustrating. And I also witnessed young people still doing school while in juvenile detention. So they're in orange jumpsuits. And while they're, being processed, waiting for what's going to happen, which is typically just a diversion program. It's not, it's not typical that young people are going to prison or jail or something like that. It's more so that they have specialty programs and stuff like that. But while they're waiting, they are in holding cells and they're in orange jumpsuits. And even there, they're putting them through the schooling process. They have a classroom, and it's kind of weird because it's like, oh, this classroom looks just like any other public school classroom in prison, and they're detention also. So it was very alarming and just put things into context for me in a deeper way than I had ever experienced before about the nature of schooling. Just having been through it, on the receiving end as, a student in many contexts, being on the other side of things in the juvenile justice system and seeing it from that angle was fascinating. So I had switched then to wanting to help kids in the schooling paradigm by doing substitute teaching and then later becoming a full-time teacher at a 8A public high school, which is a big in terms of student body population, high school, and then at a K-8 charter school. So during my time there, I really got to see firsthand what it is that is done to young people and how it destroys them and how it absolutely ruins their, self-direction and their creativity, and how it really does punish young people just for simply wanting to value things outside of whatever they're being forced to do. And so that's what inspired me to do The Honest Teacher and to create that, because I saw the problems of schooling in a very dynamic way. And I even had a background before that too, from my father. He was in New York City, a school teacher for 30 years and retired from that. So, and I got to visit him and see, what that was like. It was pretty rough because it was inner city, but so I had a pretty robust experience in the schooling paradigm, having been private school, public school, substitute teaching, public school, full-time teaching, high school, charter school, tutoring company owner as well, the criminal defense realm, my own dad's work. So I really have a pretty broad base for seeing the schooling process and the ins and outs in many angles. So I wanted to help educate families on the alternatives. And the one alternative that to me resonated as the most ethical is the self-directed education movement and unschooling. And that was something that I discovered by, I guess you could say, the route of John Taylor Gatto, a little bit John Holt, and then the Sudbury Valley School in Framingham, Massachusetts, which has been open since I think 1968. And they have, kind of more formal school building, but it's unschooling as in there's no forced curriculum, no mandatory classes, no shaming, ultimatums, and grades kind of thing. So kids are free to just explore the world, and they are supported in whatever they want, with adults acting as facilitators, like just being there to help them for whatever questions they have or pointing the resources. But there's no compulsion so that matched, I thought, the ethics of liberty much better. And that isn't to say, of course, that means that kids don't learn, they never read a textbook or anything. No, it's just in the context of their own interests. If they want to take a class, they choose to take a class. If they want to learn in a formal setting, they choose to. If they want, go to college early or something like that, they definitely can. It's just not forced upon them through threats, shame, and ultimatums. So my look into that and studying those people who did it and having friends who actually did that as well with their own kids and getting to see that, and then talking to other great people like Carrie McDonald, who is a phenomenal expert on the topic. She has her own book on this, Unschooled, raising curious, well-educated kids outside the conventional classroom. She has her master's degree in education from Harvard. She unschools her 4 kids. She's a Fee Fellow. She is, the one I like to point to the most because she has, the academic credentials and the applied experience and the authoritative book on it, I think, in terms of this really encapsulates it. So the Honest Teacher became a vehicle for me to talk specifically to the ways that public school or compulsory school, private or public, harms young people, and to point people in the direction of how to unschool by giving them resources, books to read, examples to look at, so that they can apply it in their own lives. For typically parents, of course, are the ones who would be applying that with their kids. So that's kind of what encapsulates that.
I have a twofold question. What do you think is the most damaging aspect of the compulsory school system? And on the flip side, why do some kids seem to come through that just fine and not have any problems and do just fine in life?
Sure, yeah. So the most damaging part to me is the rushed and hurriedness aspect of that pressure that inherently causes a young person to lose all sense of their self-direction, creativity, and philosophical thinking. And I saw this all the time. I still see it. When you have kids who are constantly just jumping hoops and they're exhausted all day, they're going to school. School days going extra long. They have homework. They have extracurriculars they have to do because, they need to do this to look good for their college resume or maybe whatever for high school. They are just so exhausted and overwhelmed with this work and this constant pressure to perform under the threat of getting a shaming label with grades, that they don't have any deep thinking. They are just constantly memorizing and regurgitating, just trying to get by, just trying to pass the test or get an A or whatever it is, just to get through. There's no time for just deep reflection on specific ideas and to really, let it percolate and to challenge it and to go, deep and robustly into it. It's just hurried along. Like, here's more information. Here's more information. Here, go. Next test, next quiz. Go. And that causes young people by the end of the schooling process to have a very disjointed understanding of the world and reality with all the topics broken up. It causes them to not really have any sense of like integration of knowledge and critical thinking skills, because all they can do in the time is just really try to memorize and regurgitate and get by. You know what I mean? Very few young people have that level of intelligence naturally to bypass that process. It's just overwhelming. Like the amount of time taken up, the stress and everything else, it really is just incredibly overwhelming for like most everybody, even very intelligent people. So I think that does the most damage, because then by the end of it, you come out of school and you practically know nothing, right? You really, in the truest sense, you have no way to rationally process information in context. You have no way to think for yourself. A lot of what you've learned in history is bunk, like total just propaganda from the government. And so you end up just being a very confused person. You'll fit as a cog, somewhere well in terms of being good at following orders. Of course, if you're good in school, then you're good at, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's my task. But you won't be able to self-start. You won't be able to think on a broader context about the world. And you won't have your creativity and self-drive there. It'll be very extinguished by the end of it, because you've been told, hey, whatever you want just doesn't matter. You need to focus on this. And if you have time, then maybe you can read something else. But no, your math, history, science, English, and whatever else they're going to throw at you, that has to come first. So I think that is probably the most destructive part of that, is that creates this whole trauma-based backdrop to someone's thinking. And then the other part, someone comes out of it well-adjusted. I don't think that's true at all. I don't think anybody does who's in that experience. Every aspect of public schooling creates trauma, and how people respond to trauma will be different. There's different types of responses to trauma. For some people, they end up becoming self-loathing and defeated, right? There's some kids who it's like, they feel like, I'm bad at math. They'll say that for the rest of their lives. I'm just bad at math, because they think, oh, okay, you didn't get in time for this quiz and you got a 70 or 60 and you're just bad at math. So they internalize these self-shaming labels, and then they embody that, which is just expected for young developing kids who are, not able to take in those things holistically. All they can think of is in terms of all or nothing there. So that's surprising. And then the kids who conform, they're also traumatized and damaged because they have been successfully traumatized enough to become sociopathic. So what that entails is that if you are successful in the schooling context, you have successfully shamed yourself, your inner drive to extinction, to the point where you are willing and able to put aside all your other interests and to focus on schooling and to obey and to do every assignment and to get in all your homework on time and to get in everything and to, appease the teachers, not cause too much trouble that you would, not have those higher grades. So, by and large, most young people are going to experience one of those two types of directions most typically. Of course, there could always be some exceptions to that. I don't know. I haven't seen it. I've seen everybody who I've talked to and actually processed those things have different types of trauma from it. It's just inherent, with the force, threats, shames, ultimatums, mantras put on the kids and the fear-based thinking. But those tend to be the two most common traumatic reactions, the products of that, which is, conformity, so eventual blind obedience, authoritarianism, or self-hate and shame and loathing and feelings of worthlessness. And that those are really the most common.
And it feeds into kind of the systemic nature of it all, because the more streamlined and efficient a system is, the more people they can get through the system, processed, I say, instead of educated. But so you can't allow children to pursue their own interests, as you said, because then it's not an efficient system. You got to shove them through as quickly as possible. But then, as you said, it makes it efficient in terms of getting more people through the system faster, but not efficient in terms of actually learning things. One of the things that I think of, I was a tutor for a little while for an elementary school kid who had come from Portugal, and he was trying to learn English. English is a very difficult language, and they were trying to get him to read all of the standard reader books of the boring little stories that they have, and he just was really, really struggling. And so what I did was I sat down with him and we started reading Calvin and Hobbes, which is a fantastic comic strip. And it's interesting because Bill Watterson, the author, he uses some advanced words in there, not what you would think of for teaching someone how to read, but it's really funny and really interesting illustrations and interesting little stories. And so the child, he wanted to learn because he wanted to know what was going to happen and what the fun pictures were about and what the funny story was. So totally unorthodox, but it drew him in. And that was how he ended up learning how to read English, was through something that the school system never would have done. He would have just kept struggling and thinking that he's just stupid and can't learn English. And that's the kind of thing that's not possible, I think, with the standard school system, but with something like unschooling or self-directed education is possible.
Absolutely. And that's the most common thing I see in this as well. And when you have young people actually able to be free to learn what it is that they want, they pick up the tools of the culture and they learn whatever it is they need for those processes. So young kids will learn, basic arithmetic to start, just to play different types of board games or video games where the numbers count. They want to understand it. They will learn to read when it's like, oh, okay, I want to read the subtitles on this anime, or they'll want to read a manga or a comic book or whatever it is. As you just noted, the cartoon strip with, I love, Calvin Hobbes, great series. So that's exactly it. It's when kids are actually driving what it is they're interested in, they pretty much just pick up whatever they need as they're interested. And it's just up to adults to change their mindset from being, these performance judges and be like, oh, you have to do this by this age, and be like, oh, okay, no, it's not age based. It's just based on when you're ready and interested, and you develop it as it goes, as you're naturally picking up things for your own desires. So it's not even that weird. I think we understand that as adults now way more readily, because as adults, if we're been out of school for a long time, we know, oh, okay, yeah, if I want to learn something, I have to like pick it up and learn it, right? Like if you need to do some process, like maybe fix something in your house or learn something new about a game you want to play or some type of event, you pick it up as you go. You're like, oh, okay, oh, let me look this up, right? So the same applies to young people. There's no difference there. It's just a matter of what people want to see and signaling later, right? Obviously, there's things that people might want to signal for a purpose in the end, but that can be addressed based on interest and need, right? When you're wanting to go a certain path, okay, well then you're actually interested in doing those signalings, whatever it is, passing a certification test or taking a class or studying for a standardized test. That can take place when you're actually looking to use it and you're actually looking to apply it. So
Yeah, it made me think that a lot of the expectations of the children really pushed on them by adults who were raised that way, and so expect children to act in a certain way. Like we do unschooling with our children, and one of the first questions that they get asked when they're interacting with adults, what grade are you in? We don't do that. That's what they say. And my oldest son particularly, he's very, very unique. He would not fit in at all at a public school. He's very interested in machines, and even to how he interacts with people. He goes up to someone and right away what he asks is, what brand are your washer and dryer? What about your lawnmower? And so he wants to know, and then he'll start to discuss with them the different brands of all of these appliances and which ones are better than others, which ones are gas versus electric. Like some adults, it completely throws them for a loop. Like they'd have no idea how to react to a child who is interested in these kinds of things instead of the latest superhero Marvel movie or whatever nonsense. And the freedom that children can have to develop in different ways is really outstanding. Using, again, my son as an example, we've had this electric lawnmower that has just been broken for years, and we've just had it sitting out in the shed. And I kept saying, okay, we'll take it apart someday and we'll see what's inside. And that'll be really interesting. And I kept not having time, and finally just said, you know what? Here's a screwdriver. Go see what you can do with it. He's 9, by the way, for context. And he came back like an hour later and he said, Dad, I fixed it. What? And he did. He had opened up the compartment that had a cable that had become disconnected, and he reconnected it and closed it back up and tested it out, and he fixed the lawnmower. And that is really, I think that's really amazing, because that's the kind of thing that
right.
people earn a good living doing, is repairing appliances. And he's already started to be interested and started doing that just because, wow, he thought it was neat.
Right. Yeah. It just shows you that when someone's actually able to go down the path of their own interests, they start on that path of problem solving on their own. They take a look at things, they try to figure out how things work. So it's super cool to see.
Mm-hmm. It is. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit. Still in the family, children, family, marriage. So we're switching a little bit, going to there. Is you and I keep wanting to say Faux, but it's for the philosopher. You had a great single song about married relationships, which was fantastic. Why? It's just such a unique idea to have a song about a monogamous sexual relationship. And so outside the normal, not only of in general, but of what you guys do specifically, because usually it's very freedom, get the state, that kind of thing. So what's the story behind that?
Sure. So I wanted to make a fun song like that just because most songs that you hear these days are about cheating or philandering or whatever. So I wanted to have a song that was about commitment instead, but still have a little bit of the spice. I mean, it's not very graphic or anything like that, the song, but it does have a relational experience that described there. So I wanted to have a song that'd be fun for married couples, and it's goofy. It has that electro dance, European techno vibe to it, that retro feel. But it was meant to just be kind of a goofy, funny song that would make people laugh and be like, oh, that's relatable if you're married and you really value commitment and monogamy. So that was why we made that one song. And part of it is too, I think we're still doing Liberty songs and this and that, but we definitely want to expand our horizons with different kinds of music and topics as well. So that's a part of that, having fun a little bit and doing something that's kind of in that zone. So
Cool. So the female vocals, is that Pho in the song?
mm-hmm. Yeah, that's her.
Whoa, cool. I'd only heard the kind of rapping stuff, but it's a very different vocal feeling in that song. So it's pretty fun.
She sings in a few songs. She sings in Libertarian Guys. She sings in I Will Not Take the Shot. She sings in Anti-State. So it's usually more background, although Libertarian Guys is main. But yeah, she does some singy stuff too. She is, of course, known for her raps and mainly raps, but she wants to get more into some singy type of things, maybe even some R&B. I don't know. We'll see. But this one, it's very clearly her, singing EDM-y kind of smooth instead of a rap voice.
Yeah,
so
that was pretty neat. It's interesting because true in most people's views, I think especially back in like the 90s, maybe early 2000s, libertarians were typically viewed as out there from a cultural perspective, like very sexual, doing drugs, all this kind of a very anti-establishment stuff. But it seems like recently there's been kind of a pushback against that, where libertarians have been more pro-family, pro-traditional values. Do you think that's a change in messaging from big libertarian, or do you think that the message of liberty has drawn those types of people into it?
it's a mix of things. I think like the libertine aspects of things, because I wouldn't call myself necessarily a conservative by any measure. I might look it because I don't have any tattoos or piercings, and I'm pretty straight laced in a lot of ways. But I think that the ideas of commitment and monogamy and good and healthy relationships are very attractive and are certainly something I think that people would benefit from. And I think that because there had been such a long-standing culture, especially the past 20-ish years, of people having elevated a more philandering lifestyle and cheating and promiscuous lifestyle as a norm. I'm not saying that like those things never happened or anything like that before. It's more just it's a cultural thing in terms of mass media and what's entertainment, this or that. So because of that, I think that people have gotten kind of a distaste for it at this point. You know what I mean? In a reactionary way, which I think is fine and great, but it's definitely stemming, I think, from those traumas and difficulties that come from broken relationships, right? So, in the 90s and the 80s too, I guess a bit, especially like Reagan years, you had more of the conservative rise in media and culture being more of a dominant force. And then eventually, in response to that, because of the controlling aspects of that, you had a left-wing rise, a reactionary group of people who were reacting to their upbringings in that conservative culture and who, rejected those things. And so they embraced more of a sexually promiscuous, partying lifestyle or childless lifestyle. And so, in that realm, because of that, there's a lot of dysfunctions that come from there. Mostly, when it comes to kids being raised, I would say one of the roots there is fatherlessness and not having guidance and not having love and commitment, then that creates trauma and instability for children, right? When they have their parents fighting, when they split, when you have a parent absent and you're craving them to be there for you, to mirror their emotions and to learn from them and to have them protect you and to guide you. When you lack that because of an absent parent and or because of fighting parents, it becomes a desire, right? It becomes something like, man, I wish I had that as a kid. And so I think that has taken its turn and has reignited an interest of people wanting to have respectful relationships and having commitment and long-term orientation and having stability for kids. So that's kind of what I see as the total picture. I think that is a good thing. But I would say I probably personally reject a lot of the forced government right-wing traditionalist values in terms of that being like a forcible thing by the state, or that being something that has to be, I guess, observed absolutely by all people at all times, whatever. Like I don't think of that in terms of something that's a violent mandate. I think it's unwise to do so. I think that there's a lot of risks and problems from living that, but obviously people are free to, and within consent. Obviously, I don't think that consensual relationships in that way should be shut down violently or whatever. I guess you could say made criminal, of course. It's just in this context, it's more so a matter of creating a culture that fosters that respective commitment in a positive and building way, not from a threat and shaming way and denigrating way. So that's how I kind of see it. And an easy comparative of that is, I guess you could say, is someone who labels the alternative as being like, oh, you're a bunch of degenerates and you're just like bad and evil, right? Like, I don't take it from that perspective. I take it more from the positive perspective of, do you want a healthy relationship? Do you want to be with someone who respects you and who wants to work toward connection with you? Do you want to be in a stable relationship where you can have kids and know that they're going to be there for your kids and to help raise them and to be a good parent? Do you want to build together, right? Do you want to actually have a home and a wealth in aggregate from, working and stewarding for years and decades? Those kinds of things. I think the sales point from the positive side to me makes a lot more of a wide appeal allure than the kind of like moralist denigrating, fire and brimstone angle on that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. Especially when it comes from a religious perspective and your eternal salvation is on the line. There's almost an element of coercion there, not physical violence, but still threatening for someone who really believes that if I do this, I'm going to be damned for eternity. That's not a good outcome,
Right. Yeah. If you're doing it for mystical reasons, then you lose sight of why it is you're doing what you're doing. It could like those types of reasons can short circuit your impulsivity in a sense, like, oh, I won't do this because I'm afraid, I'm going to be tortured or something. But that doesn't actually drive your self-direction and your motivation for wanting to have a good relationship and what it is you're trying to build. And I think that matters a lot more. In the end is why do you do what you do? Why do you want this kind of relationship? What do you want to see out of it? What kind of communication do you want? What kind of experiences do you want? And so that's what drives me to, monogamy and commitment. That's what drives me to wanting that type of life. Not just simply, oh, this is something that is bad, or someone says, oh, it's a sin, or, oh, whatever. I think that there's real positive reasons, beneficial reasons, and things that actually make you feel fulfilled and have purpose and build for long term that inspire that type of commitment. You know what I mean? That should be the root. It should be something that's a blessing, something that makes you happy and makes you feel fulfilled, right? So
I remember I was listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he was talking specifically not even about this subject of infidelity more broadly, but about polygamy or polygyny, one man marrying multiple women. You talk about how those are not stable societies. They always have the same kind of problems that eventually lead to societal decay and collapse. And it made me think, kind of putting it in terms of a free market, if there are no other incentives other than what people want to do, going for long-term stability, a general better life, it seems that most people, the system of relationships that would win out in the end is monogamy, with probably a close-knit extended family, because that seems to be the recipe for the greatest flourishing of the humans that are involved.
Yeah, I think that inherently, when it comes to that type of relationship, I like to think of this in an economic sense. If you start dividing your attention up among romantic partners, that comes at a cost. Like there is no such thing as you have like multiple people of yourself, right? If you have your attention be given to one person instead of the other, well, the other person's not getting that attention. If you're giving your bodily resources to them, well, the other person's not getting bodily resources. If you're giving financial resources, well, and again, it's dividing that up. So the more you divide that romantic interest up, the more you're going to be exhausted and expended on those things. And I think that ultimately does create conflict. It does create potential for jealousy. It can create potential for, basically different people's needs not getting met because you're not fully invested and committed to that one person. And some people will try to say, well, what about having multiple kids? Aren't you dividing your attention there too? And it says, I say, yeah, it's.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries at all. Probably just an internet issue.
So looking at it from the economic perspective, I think that's a really cool. And one way I've thought of it before is people like to say, oh, we love everyone. You got to love everybody. But love, it's okay to say that and to have that kind of basic respect for other people and consideration. But actual love, that takes time and interactions in order to develop and express. And you don't have unlimited time. It takes, and the deeper you want that relationship to be, the more time you have to invest in it. And you can have a lot of casual acquaintances, but really close friends, of necessity, the number decreases because it takes time to build that connection. And really, I'm a bit of a romantic, so true love, that takes most of your life, just from the sheer necessity of the time that you have to spend interacting with the other person.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when it comes to that depth, it's hard to say you have love with somebody if you don't have emotional vulnerability. If you're not talking about difficult topics, struggles, pains, things that you're going through that are not things that you necessarily would want to share in public kind of thing, then it's really hard to say you have love, because you would have only the side of somebody that is the easy parts of their lives, the positive things, right? It's very easy to idealize somebody if you just see what is good or the best versions of themselves, right? Which is why a lot of people have that on social media. They look at somebody and they'll be like, oh, they have all these nice pictures of themselves and they took like 20 minutes to take a selfie, or they like look at all the things that they accomplished, but they don't realize how much pain they have behind the scenes or struggles, or conflicts. So that is something that's incredibly important to have as a backdrop for an intimate relationship. If you actually want love and commitment, is that involves each person being able and willing to talk through and process both the positive and the negative thoughts and feelings and emotional struggles and points of conflict. So you can't have that robustly with lots of people, as you said, because of the time issue. It's not possible to give your full attention to multiple people at once and to hear all their problems and all their different, issues and to empathize with them or to mirror them, which of course ties into, politicians and why they could never meaningfully represent the constituency, because there's no way they can shake, 10 million hands or whatever and actually hear everybody's thoughts and feelings. It's a nonsense thing. Mm-hmm. So, that type of intimacy just cannot be had. And ultimately, the number of people who you can truly have that depth of relationship with, it is few, because of the time required and the vulnerability required. So I agree there that, the more you spread that out and the more you make that thin, the less you're actually having a loving, intimate relationship. You're moving toward superficiality and acquaintance level, the more you move away from depth of regular emotional vulnerability, connection, and mutual, reciprocal understanding of each other.
And there's something to be said too with dealing with the darkness that's in a person's soul, discussing deep and sometimes painful things with other people. And because it's painful, people tend to not like pain. And so it can be, especially if there's a societal expectation, or at least not condemnation of it, to just, when things start to get that emotionally deep, to just slide to another person and to have that, happy, light, surface level and superficial, but enjoyable relationship with another person, but then never getting down to what needs to be dealt with. And it seems to me like there's almost an element of cowardice there, of a unwillingness to face the difficult things of life. The tricky thing is that it's really easy to do, to just, it's like eating candy. It's really easy to just eat candy and keep eating candy because it tastes so good and it's right here, but it's not going to be good in the long run.
Yeah, and that is its own difficulty getting to that point, because for many people, if they haven't really worked through their own traumas and their own reactions and habits, they're also having to, in the moment with the person that they're trying to connect with, their loved one, they're making their own mistakes. Whether it's being impatient or using shaming labels or using generalizations about somebody or imputing malintent, or setting expectations on someone that's unexpected and being mad at them if they don't meet them. There's like many different ways, toxic behavior traits can come out if one hasn't worked through their own. So that's its own journey and very difficult, journey to do, to be in a relationship with someone while you're still also processing your own dysfunctions, especially if you have a lot of them because of lots of trauma from childhood and poor modeling, which is more common than ever thanks to so many broken relationships, so many divorces, and so many, toxic behaviors picked up like in public school, like we talked about.
Yeah. And then it's very easy, like we said, to just avoid that by sliding to another person whenever it starts to become too difficult, whenever you would have to grow and overcome those problems. Because if you're just with one person, they can call you out on it and say, hey, this isn't an okay behavior. You're doing this and it needs to stop because it's hurting me, it's hurting the children, hurting our relationship. And then you have to face that instead of just going to the next person. There's a lack of growth, it seems to me, that, or maybe turn it around, a personal growth that happens in that kind of faithful monogamous relationship that then, as you said, sets the stage for the children, for them to develop stronger characters, stronger intellects into better people. And then that can continue forth in future generations.
Absolutely. Yeah. That long-term orientation and modeling for kids is key. And for men and women, they have their stereotypical faults, we can say, in terms of what is most likely, right? Guys are more likely to seek sexual validation outside the relationship because they get emotionally exhausted quickly. They don't want to deal with women's emotions as much, and they just want to have that, sexual release. So guys are the ones more likely to do that type of thing. And girls, when they feel unheard or they can't get mirrored enough, or they feel invalidated, right, they seek emotional validation outside the relationship. And that can also, of course, then lead to sexual. But that tends to be the most typical experience, right? Is that guys don't know how to connect as well, and they just want to, get their sexual release, and they do that outside the relationship. Girls, they feel emotionally invalidated, not, know how to bring it up, or afraid to bring up their thoughts and feelings to process them, and then they want to go message some other person, and start a relationship, whatever outside. It's a very common flaw and trope, and breaking that requires that mentality of saying, okay, I want to work extra hard at this and be vulnerable and try to communicate, even if you feel a little fearful, and to process those things. And of course, if you need help beyond that, of course, if you have well-adjusted, safe others, or just a good counselor, in therapy, those are ways that you can get help for those types of things. But it's very trying for a lot of people to get those needs met these days, because I think so many people do not have that modeled for them now these days, because the divorce rate has been so relatively high and the modeling of behavior has been so terrible, especially as amplified within the schooling and media context. People's ability to have emotional depth while also valuing truth, which is a big part of that. Truth as a value, as a priority, has to be something that's grounded in the relationship. That has been lost in a lot of ways and as a cultural norm. And so that makes it difficult for people to have connection when they don't have that modeling and know what to do, and they don't have truth as their ultimate value.
Now, it does seem to me like there's been what, ironically, at this point is almost a countercultural movement back toward religion, back toward traditional lifestyle, hashtag trad life, and things like that. Do you think, is that kind of starting to turn the tables on all of this? Is that a legitimate movement that's gaining steam, or is it just like a passing fad? What do you think?
It's gained steam, but I do believe that the people who are spearheading those things are actually not very versed in the things that they are trying to espouse. From what I see, a lot of the people who are spearheading this are projecting that as their ideal, right? They're saying, I want this thing, and they re-idealize it, right? In these like 1950s pictures, memes they post and this, that. Or, oh, here's some like crusader, and okay, you're a knight, and magically you have Western traditional values or something, which is to me comedic. Because again, they're doing the same problem. They're reinventing the problem of this idealization, this conceptualization of, oh, this is how a perfect relationship is. And they haven't done zilch on actually thinking through what it takes to have that kind of relationship, the vulnerability, communication, the thought process, all that type of self-work depth. They haven't done any of that. So I think that we have kind of a dangerous reactionary element to the major cultural leftism and cultural Marxism, because the reaction without the principles and without the depths of self-knowledge work ends up recreating the shaming control complex that then creates the reactivity from the next generation of kids, right? So if you have that reactionary swing and you start having parents who are like forceful with their kids and saying, oh, you need to like go to church and read the Bible, or you need to be this way, and shame them, or that kind of thing, you've just reinvented the trauma process, right? Because now you haven't taught kids thinking skills. You haven't taught kids what it takes to have a healthy relationship. You haven't taught emotional vulnerability. You've just created this idealization of, oh, traditional family, but you have no actual specifics of advice about how to have healthy relationships, healthy boundaries in a relationship, how to have communication, that goes both ways, how to be vulnerable. And these are things that are well known and well written about. And I often reference, to me, some of the best authors on that, from Marshall B. Rosenberg to Charles Whitfield to Daniel Siegel. There's just a host of different great authors who are doctors, psychologists, who have families who've applied this and who have lived it, not just talk about it, walk it. And I think that is really what is needed if you want to sustain those values. You need to be able to both have the knowledge of how to, have that, but also then to not reinstitute the traumas on your kids that makes them then react to become the next generation of the leftists, kind of, in that way. Mm-hmm. So I think that the reactionary aspect, I think for some people, is kind of like them trying to control for what they want as ideal. It's like, oh, this is what I want to be. This is what I want to be. This is what I want to be. But if you see nothing but those images, if you see nothing but the idealization, and you don't see them posting about, here's how to have a good relationship, here's some books to read to work on your childhood trauma, here's a great book to read on how to set healthy boundaries and respect them in a relationship, then you have nothing. You've literally just created a niche fandom and clique of people who are like, oh yeah, Western traditional values, and they really don't know anything, and they're just going to go on to abuse their kids, hit them, and reignite all the traumas, that they were so triggered by that led to their reactionary state. Mm-hmm. So that's my personal biggest concern. And I don't focus too much on that. Like, I don't like have a page where I'm like, let me focus on relationships and all this stuff as a thing. But I do see that sometimes within the Honest Teacher, resources and books about healthy relationships and peaceful parenting and things like that, just to get that in people's hands. Because again, if they can get some of that knowledge in the process of helping their child and looking at unschooling, then there we go. We got them on the path of self-knowledge and healing and passing that on to, their kids at least. Right. But it is something that needs to be done. I just don't know as of current that there's anyone doing it in a very healthy and unified way. It's typically more divorced from the context we talk in. We talk in the context often of the liberty sphere, non-aggression principle, and philosophy. There's people who are more in the psychology of things, like they're psychologists or therapists and stuff, and they're talking about the healthy patterns, healthy thought patterns, healthy relationships, things. But those are often not together. Like it's not typically in a unified presentation. I would say Stefan Molyneux probably was one of the ones who really did do that. He had that focus, and he did try to touch on both. But there hasn't really been since him, I think, a sole individual doing that type of unification in a major public way, as a focus, right? The integration of self-knowledge and healing oneself in good relationships, plus the voluntaryist thing. I mean, of course, I would love to do more with that and things like that, but I have to get all my other ducks in a row before I do so. Yeah, I mean, I could, but that's something I would say for down the road with more, years of experience under my belts. Because what good is that without when I have kids and when I show it and live it, people would take that much more seriously. Mm-hmm. Even Stefan only had one kid, right? He was out there, fertilize your eggs, and it's like, dude, you only had one kid yourself. Get out of here. You know what I mean? It's like,
yeah,
it's like, get out of here, dude. But he had good, good advice and stuff. But
yeah, that sounds like a neat opening for someone who could have that kind of a voice and start that kind of a real movement instead of the superficial, glossy one that a lot of people are buying into right now, of traditional families and the idealized traditional life, instead of building upon solid foundational principles.
Yeah, it's tough because it's an integration of a lot of very specialized fields. To integrate this thoroughly, we're talking about philosophy and ethics, behavioral science and psychology, biology, dealing with even things that you do in terms of what you eat and how you take care of yourself. I mean, there's so many different aspects to it. It is difficult for one person to do correctly and consistently well, and it's also kind of hard too, because a lot of people who are in our space when it comes to public figures, doing so always comes at its own expense, right, with family and kids, because you can't be a big activist and constantly traveling and doing speaking and stuff like that without that having an effect on you not being around, for your kids. So I think that, the nature of being an activist in the liberty sphere can conflict and clash with often having that needed development and growth and spending time with your kids. It's difficult to balance. It is difficult. And so that's why I think it's a time thing. I think we will have a generation of us who are going to be those experts and those, unified thinkers, but it'll probably take another 10 or 20 years, right? For those of us who are in the zone now, who have unified this philosophy and have years under our belt with having kids and raising them up to a decent point in their lives, and then to be able to speak from experience with that credibility, it's going to take some time. It's definitely going to take some time, but we're there, in terms of having that groundwork being laid. We're definitely there we have a lot of people who are solid voluntarists, small libertarians, working on the peaceful parenting, working on the unschooling, applying it, living it. And I think that once those things come to a head and we share our ideas and we apply them and we discuss and we, grow, we're going to have a pretty well unified messaging, to offer people on that kind of thing,
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing that the liberty side has to offer. There's a contrast to even when stuff on the other side, whether left or right statists, when they start grassroots, the object is always to get control of the government one way or another, to pass this law, get this policy in place, to force people to do what we think is right. Whether that's being able to have punishing people who don't like this kind of family, or punishing people who do anything but this kind of family. But ours operates from the opposite perspective. We want the grassroots, we want individual people to change, but then we want that to spread so that more people can change, not so that anyone can be forced to live a certain way, but so that everyone can choose appropriately, having all of the tools, all of the freedoms necessary, choose to live in the best way possible. And free market, as we were talking about before, for a lot of people, that's going to look a specific way. Some people, it's going to look a different way, and that's okay. And bringing it back to the schooling, some people, like we mentioned, sitting in a classroom and learning that kind of way, that works for some people. A lot of people it doesn't. And children and adults need to have that freedom to be able to learn and improve themselves in ways that work best for them, instead of being coerced into meeting someone else's expectations, let alone the expectations of a government bureau somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But Jack, man, we got into some deep stuff. I was that.
Yeah, well, that's what we do here. We go deep.
It was a good conversation, though. So before we wrap up, any last things you want to hit on? Any plugs for things that you and Phil are doing?
Sure, why not? So the next thing we have coming up, I guess if we're still alive after the hurricane, is on September 9th, Lou Perez is coming down. We're doing a comedy show at the gun range, and that will be at Reload Gun Range in Florida. So we have that on Eventbrite. You just Google "Don't Shoot Lou." It'll come right up, "Don't Shoot Lou." And that'll be a lot of fun. So we have him coming down to do a little bit of comedy. We're going to shoot on the range together. We'll have a lounge hangout, and there's 3 separately ticketed events. So that will be, a fun time Saturday afternoon to evening. And as of right now, like we're in, other than that, we're in a waiting period for the next Voluntaryist arc. So I'm going to be launching the next campaign, the next arc, probably in November, maybe November 1st, tentatively at this point. And we do have another secret project that I wish I could talk about, but I can't right now. But you're going to love it when it comes out finally. It's been a long process, another long process one, but I think you're going to really like what we have. What's that?
Can you give us a hint?
I can give you a hint that it is, as most as I can say, is it's a book.
Okay,
that's as far as I'll go.
So this is a good
I'm
start.
not saying what kind of book, what's in it, the audience, the topic, but it's something that.
All right.
And it's not. I'm not talking about my third book. I have a third book that'll be coming out, a nonfiction book.
Another new book. Okay.
Yes, I do have another nonfiction book. It'll be the end of this trilogy: the Libertarian Voluntarism Definitive Guide, Vision for Libertarian Future, and the last is Philosophical Voluntarism. So that will be the last one for that trilogy, which I'm kind of envisioning as this introductory primer set for people who are kind of new to it all and want to just understand it all quickly and like kind of get some self-help and get some guidance and principles instilled. That's kind of what I'm framing that trilogy as. So, and I don't know, we'll maybe do some more songs. I don't know. We have them written, we have them ready to go, but it's been a busy season. So,
so being a fan of the Voluntarist, though, I've got to ask, the next arc, what's it going to focus on? Is Jack going to have confrontations with the government? Is a new superhero going to show up? A super villain? What? I want to know.
Okay. So if you do want to know, I can tell you this. So the next arc is called Suit Saga, and there will be a villain. In fact, if you go to Indiegogo, like if you were to go to igg.me/at/suit saga, I know it's a lot to say, but anyway, I could give a link later. But there is a pre-campaign sign-up page. So if you want to get notified when it launches, you can put your email in there, and you see a little short preview of the cover for Suit Saga, a little piece of it, and then I'll give you a hint of what's coming. But the Suit Saga with the title, it's going to be talking about how he finally gets his suit. So even though we show the suit in the cover here, he doesn't get his suit in the Origins arc, because that's technically when we're developing all the character and plot elements before he actually gets to the point. And then Suit Saga, that's how you'll see how he gets his suit, but then that's just the tip of the iceberg. There is a ton more, story development and character introduction and other stuff like that in that arc. So we're going to be shooting at a minimum for that first issue of that arc. And I don't know, I'm just hoping for the moon. If I can get even a 10% of what Ripperverse did, that would be awesome. So that's my goal now. I'm looking at Eric July's work. I'm like, all right, here we go. Let's go for this. So it's very inspiring. And I think that the independent industry, his comic series, Cyberfrog, a bunch of other Comicsgate people included, I think we're really seeing that paradigm shift starting to waterfall at this point. From what I'm just watching online at the independent crowd, you're seeing in droves their success and the shifting over toward the alternative entertainment media. And Eric July really, I think, has done the best of that so far in terms of signaling and showing how it gets done. But he's not alone in that. And there's several other people in that zone who I follow and have been paying attention to. And it's definitely starting to, pouring over the dam of all of Hollywood trying to keep out the alternatives while they, status SJW everything up. So
they've been
ready.
They've been asking for that for a long time, though, the Hollywood and big comics and the publishers, because they've just been, it seems like they've been churning out stuff that they want to see and not caring about what people want to watch. And so at first they could fool people with like, oh, it's the new Marvel movie, it's the new Disney movie, the new Star Wars movie. But the numbers have steadily been declining of people who actually show up to watch those and who buy the books and toys and movies. And it seems like not only are they starting to feel it, but other people are starting to go into that void in the market that they've left. People like Eric July, people like yourself. So that's exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're just doing it to themselves at this point because they have limits, right? They have limits about the content they can make. And then, of course, with who they put in for their writers, they're just making it all SJW status stuff that people don't want in the first place. Yeah. So to me, I'm just like, all right, we're going to win across the board because Eric's focus is on just having something that doesn't do all that nonsense pandering and just focuses on, having a respected timeline story, right? So his book's not even like anything crazy in terms of, oh, it's like something political really, or it's anti-woke or something. No, it's just a regular comic book story. It's just like, hey, we're just going to go back to like originally how, people wanted to have their comics without all this nonsense in it, right? So he's just doing okay, let's cut out the junk. And here's a refreshing comic story. Yeah. Right. That's it. And then boom, people are like, oh, okay, finally, something that's without all this annoying crap in it. Yay. And then me, I'm on the other side where I'm like, I'm doing the things that they won't do. I'm doing what nobody else would ever do in the mainstream, which is flip the norms on their head about the government being a default good. And I'm not doing it in a way where it's preachy, like my comic books, especially, once I left my original, prototyping and I went to the actual origin story, my comics are not some, Jack Chick track here. They're literally a comic book story. It's just, okay, instead of the government being a default normal good, it's, okay, it's just viewed as a default normal evil. And it's like, whoa, like to people, that's so shocking because they're so used to every single thing being like, yeah, government's good and necessary. And at worst, it just has some bad apples, or there's this one bad government and they need a different leader, right? That's it. Mine, I just, okay, I change the norms and I do it in a way that nobody else will ever touch. So that makes me immediately 10 times more unique than anything Marvel DC will ever put out. So that's my market advantage.
Nice. I love it. Well, get those links over. put them in the description and people can check it out. I'm going to go check it out. Suit Saga.
Yeah, Suit Saga is the next arc.
All right. Let me check it out. Jack, thanks so much for spending time with us today. And you have a great day. Be safe in that hurricane. But more important than being safe, be free.
You too. I appreciate it. I will. I'll try.
We'll do the best we can. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what we do here, please like, share, subscribe, comment, and go over to our website where you can offer donations, request help us help people who are in need voluntarily. And we'll see you next time.